And I thought it would be covered, like in the grief class or the crisis class. Never. And so over the years, I've been just kind of collecting some data, looking at some things, and still, I was afraid to do a presentation on it. The first time I did a presentation was in a very conservative part of the country, and I, believe it or not, actually asked to have an off-duty police officer in the audience. And that might seem outrageous, but I just didn't know what to expect. Oh, Heidi, I hope you didn't get snow. All right, so my other presenter, unfortunately, ill, so she wasn't able to make it. But so again, I'm Laura Schmuldt. I full-time faculty, and I also have a small private practice called Starfish Counseling and Consulting. I live kind of near the beach, so I like that starfishy thing. Please, at any time, if you have questions, comments, I would love to hear them. And my last name is a little tricky, a little German, I know, so it's totally fine to just please call me Laura. So, no, that's no problem. Don't even worry. I even spell it wrong sometimes. Okay, so I'm going to just go through a little bit of the research of what we know about frequencies of abortion, mental health consequences, and then we're going to open it up for a discussion of why it's being left out, okay, why it's not included in school, in conferences, why in screening is it not asked about in intakes. So I have a number of stories of abortions that I have collected, some from friends, some from clients, and they've all given me my permission to use these to kind of spread, get some interest, collect some data. If any of you find this interesting as a research topic and you're looking to do some research, please, please, please contact me. I would love to work with you. So anyway, this is in gratitude for people who have given me their stories so that others will understand. Okay, so part of my goal for this is for you to have absolutely no idea how I feel about abortion, if it's good, bad, right, wrong, because it doesn't matter. My opinion does not matter. And so I want this to be an apolitical zone to keep it safe. So if you have a question, just kind of ask yourself, is my comment or question, is it politically motivated? Could it hurt someone? All right. So I know you'll all be very respectful of that, but I do just like to mention it. I have started bringing up abortion in my classes, and I flat out had a student say, abortion is wrong, I don't believe in it. And one of the students in the class had an abortion and was very hurt by that. Absolutely, Maya. Thanks for asking. I'll put that in the chat right now. And also, if you want a copy of this PowerPoint, just send me an email. I'd be happy to send it to you. So that's laura.schmuldt@ucumberlands.edu.
Laura, if
Yeah.
you would care to send the presentation to the school to Jennifer Tooth, I don't know if she's the one who contacted you to speak, they will put the presentation up in our advising forum.
Oh, awesome. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Okay, so always take care of yourself. I know enough. I know the abortion is prevalent enough that it's entirely possible it's impacted someone in the room. Maybe it was a partner who had an abortion, maybe you had an abortion, maybe a family member. And so take care of yourself. If this is a presentation that's triggering, do what you gotta do, whatever that means for you. So we're gonna look at the who, what, where, and whys of abortion. We're gonna look at some possible reactions, and then also some possible interventions, and then we're gonna open it up to kind of have a powwow about what we can do. So I don't think I need to give you the definition, but basically Wikipedia tells us that it's the ending of pregnancy by removing a fetus or an embryo before it can survive outside of the uterus. If it occurs spontaneously, that's a miscarriage. An abortion may be caused purposely, and that is called an induced abortion or less frequently induced miscarriage. The word abortion is often used to mean only induced abortions. A similar procedure after the fetus could potentially survive outside the womb is known as a late termination of pregnancy. Abortion is in the news a lot right now. Anybody following the news? What have you heard, if anything, about abortion in the news?
I've heard a lot of people saying that late-term abortion is committing murder. I've heard that late-term abortions are, it's mostly coming from the one side of the spectrum that believes that late-term abortions are not an ethical thing for a person to do. Mm-hmm. And when they don't stop to realize that sometimes the person has no other choice.
Thank you. Yes. That's in the news. I just heard today in the news that their legislature is being brought forward that would make abortion illegal if a heartbeat can be detected. Now, the heartbeat can be detected as early as 6 weeks. And most women don't, a lot of women don't even know they're pregnant at that point. So that's in a way to make all abortion legal. In Mississippi, there's recent legislature to have people really be charged with committing murder and also prison sentences to go along with it. So I do know from my clients who have had abortions, when they hear about these kind of things in the news, they are triggered, all right? So conception in the United States, it is half and half, planned or unplanned. So think about that. For every 2 conceptions, 1 is planned, 1 is not, okay? So 50% of conceptions are planned. And of that 50%, half will go on to be terminated. So 25% of all pregnancies in the United States will be terminated. And I got this off of the CDC, Center for Disease Control, has a ton of useful information. So this shows the percent of pregnancies aborted in the United States by county or state of residence. Wow, 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 look at that. So that dark blue is anything from 0 to 1.9%, up to that almost brick red color is 50 to 93.3%. So looking at that, are there any, like what stands out to you? What do you notice? What surprises you? I think, like, look at that down by Texas, that very dark red spot. Any guess what that might be about?
It's the one location where people are able to go to.
Yeah, John, that could totally be the case, that there aren't many abortion clinics maybe in that area, and there is an abortion provider in that county. I suspect, and I don't have anything to back this up, but I suspect that it's also, I believe it's illegal in Mexico, and so it could very well be people coming across the border to obtain an abortion. So how about where you live? Or what do you see? Does it surprise you? So I'm in North Carolina, just above the South Carolina border, and it looks like where I live that abortion is 20% to 29% of pregnancies. And I know that South Carolina has, they've made so many legal restrictions on abortion that I don't think there's any more abortion providers in South Carolina. So people would potentially come over to my county. We have a Planned Parenthood here to get an abortion. Okay, any other thoughts or ideas on that?
I live in Florida. I thought it, for some reason, so this is actually a shallow thought, but I thought it might be more because just lots of crazy things happen in Florida. Like, I read articles and, crime articles a lot. And it's just like every other incident is happening in Florida, between. So I just thought for some reason it would be a little bit more, but I mean, whatever. I'm glad,
Florida, and I do love Florida, but I've been a jogger for like 30 years, and I've only been physically attacked twice.
In Florida, probably.
Most times we're in Florida.
In Florida. Exactly. That's exactly. I literally looked because I was like, oh, I bet you Florida's going to be red. Oh, it's orange. Okay. Like, I totally could imagine. Yeah.
and it's nothing against Florida, but yeah, I don't know.
I don't know why either, but I mean, unless things aren't being reported, I don't know, but. Yeah.
And I think it's weird that the whole state was one color. Like, makes me kind of wonder. So this looks at if a minor wants to get an abortion, what has to happen? And so you can kind of look at the color of the state and see below what that means. Does anybody know what it means when a law is enjoined?
Doesn't that mean when the law is put into effect?
It's in effect, but it's really not enforced. Okay. So the law is on the books, but nothing really happens. So I used to live in Seattle, Washington before marijuana was legal recreationally. And it was basically an enjoined law that it was on the books, but nobody got in trouble for recreational marijuana. But they could. So you can see that very few states that I think we see as politically voting more towards liberal kind of things, like New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Washington, Oregon, they have no parental law in effect. And, those are also states where we see several of those have death with dignity, right? They have different laws with marijuana, and you can see those dark blue states tend to be the states that we think of as maybe being a little more conservative. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to just tell a few stories. Obviously, names and faces. This isn't the picture or the name of the person whose story I'm telling. But this, we'll call her Jenna, was somebody I was friends with since like 5th grade. Freshman year, very beautiful girl. And freshman year, she was dating like a high school senior who was like a football player, like kind of a big deal. And I know that they became sexually active. I don't think she was really wanting to, but she wanted to keep him. And they weren't using birth control. And so she did become pregnant. And in our town, her family was pretty prominent. Her dad was the bank president. Her mom was on like the school board, like people knew this family. And so Jenna was very afraid about this pregnancy and didn't tell. Her parents told a couple friends, and her friends finally got her to tell her parents. And by the time she told her parents, it was well into the 2nd trimester. And I believe she wanted to have the baby, but her parents absolutely forbid it. They made an appointment, and it was a late-term abortion. And a late-term abortion can be a fairly grisly procedure. I'm blunt. It was a 3-day kind of thing. And Jenna, afterwards, she didn't really say
Laura?
Yes.
May I ask everybody to please mute your microphones?
Thank you.
Hear somebody typing?
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think you being in charge, you can click on there and mute them as well. But yeah, good point. I was muted too. I definitely want to hear your comments, but please, when you're not talking, if you could just keep it on mute. So if you could keep it on mute, just so we don't have feedback. Y'all can hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Okay. So anyway, Jenna, she went on to have a bunch of different boyfriends in high school. Never really talked about the abortion, what she went through. But like, I mean, as soon as she graduated from high school, she became pregnant, and she was supposed to go off to college and just canceled that. She wasn't going to go. She was going to have this baby. She married the guy, and they went on to very rapidly, but I noticed.
Hello?
Hello? You hear me okay, John?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Oh, you're fine. No worries. Every year around the same time that she had that abortion, around the same month, around the same time of year, she would really struggle. She would become depressed. She would say she was unhappy in her marriage. She would say she couldn't handle her kids. And we know enough as counselors to know that's how trauma works, right? Yeah. If we're not aware that it's the anniversary of something, our mind remembers, right? So Jenna has not gotten help for that that I know of. Okay, so this is looking at birth outcome by ethnicity by decade. And so you can see, let's just say, for example, with non-Hispanic white women, there were, in 2010, not the whole decade, I'm sorry, for every 1,000 women, 58.7 had a percent had a live birth, 9.8 had an abortion, and 15.5% had a had fetal loss. Okay, so why does unplanned pregnancy occur? Well, 52% of the time, no contraception is used at all. 43% of the time, contraception is used, but it's not used properly. And only 5% of the time does an unintended pregnancy happen. I'm sorry, I got to state that again. 52% of the time, no contraception is used at all. 43% of the time, it's used inconsistently, and 5% of the time, the contraception fails. Okay, so it's about 95% of the time that either contraception is used or not used consistently. So let's talk about that. Why were a wonderful comment? Yeah. Women are shamed. They hide this aspect of their life. Absolutely. So many women, in fact, won't tell a current partner about an abortion they had in the past with another partner. But why is our 95% of people either not using contraception or using it inconsistently? What are your thoughts about that?
It might be because they either don't have insurance to pay for the pill, or they have no money to pay for a condom, or as I can see it, a lot of them are unaware of what to do properly to avoid conception.
Oh my gosh, I had a teenage client who they were only having sex standing up because she had heard, that would work. I think those are great points, everything you said. I also think, oh yes, please, Heidi.
Oh, sorry. So I had the opportunity to work with young people that were trafficked.
Oh, wow.
So I think in a lot of those cases, they're not given that protection, so that there's a power and control piece to that as well. And there's a lot of lack of education. Also, sometimes the young ladies feel that if they have a baby with this person that is trafficking, there's kind of a bond between the two of them. So there's as well. In Minnesota, we have a program called RIP, where our children's hospital follows these young people within the communities and actually meets them within the community to give them protection and things like that, and educates them within the community so that they're not having to come to the clinic, because sometimes they can't get to the clinic for a wide variety of reasons.
Wow, Heidi, thank you. You know, and that's, oh, please go ahead, John.
I mean, I think people just, and then there's the reality of how people have sex. And I think a lot of people like to have sex the old way they just like to have sex. They enjoy whatever, they enjoy sex and they partake. Working with the LGBTQ
Do you feel that using that takes away something from the experience? Is that what you're saying?
And especially working with the LGBTQ plus community and the HIV community that I work with, many times, many within the community do not use condoms. They do not want to use condoms. They have no interest in using condoms. The education is there. It is continuously thrown at the community. I think oftentimes we see it as a failure, that if people are not practicing sex the way that we as kind of counseling do, and to a certain degree, counseling in a medical perspective, we kind of, to a certain degree, wrap a condom around the conversation, then we're not really looking at the reality of how people are having sex and maybe other forms of treatment or other forms of contraception, whether it's PrEP, whether it's other forms, to really kind of understand that how people are having sex on the ground is not necessarily how we as educators feel that they should be having it. There's two different.
Yes, I love that, John. That's such that disconnect, because we're talking about really sometimes us as educators sort of in the medical field, that we might be putting our kind of expectations or values onto people and overlooking their feelings. That's a really, boy, I'll tell you what, if it were up to me, all of us would meet up again and talk about this and come up with a book or an article, because you guys are giving me ideas that I haven't even thought of. So this is great. I get really, well, I am being apolitical, I promise, but I get very frustrated when I hear people say that women get abortions because they're too lazy to use birth control. I have a real problem with that. And especially like the subset of the population that's had multiple abortions, because that is the case for many women. And they, quote, use it as birth control. I don't believe that to be true at all. And how I kind of formed that opinion was the only place I've ever seen questions about abortion asked in an intake was at a substance abuse center. And we noted a correlation between women who had a trauma history, okay, specifically sexual abuse, and multiple abortions. And so what could we kind of speculate? What could we hypothesize as being the kind of common denominator? What's going on that would create that situation?
I think sometimes if women potentially have had multiple abortions, I don't want to say that they use it as a form of birth control, but depending upon what situation they're in and the trauma that surrounds it, essentially like that sort of does become their birth control, because it's so normalized that that's just how it's handled. I think as counseling professionals, we have to be cautious as to how we help them process that and then educate them to look into other ways of doing that, and maybe discussing like the long-term challenges that their body could have due to continuing that type of behavior, but not placing our views on it, more of like an education standpoint, or maybe connecting them with a medical professional to have that professional relay that information to them, so that they can understand kind of what's happening when all that continues to happen to their body.
Yeah. I sometimes wonder if somebody has been sexually abused, or even maybe if they're taught that sex is bad, sex is wrong, that the act of using contraception, going out and purchasing it, obtaining it, is almost them admitting that they're having sex, and they'd rather sort of kind of be ambivalent about it. Do you see what I mean? Or if there's a lot of trauma around sexuality, maybe it's hard to think about, that maybe they kind of don't obtain contraception because they don't want to think about their own sexuality. I don't know. I'm just sort of thinking that through. I could be way off, but that's something that I've been wondering about.
Well, I can tell you from my point of view that yes, that can be the case. I am familiar with a few people in that situation, and their sexuality is such a touchy topic to them that they're embarrassed to even discuss it with anybody, much less go out and purchase contraception.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, so Carrie's story is another example of what can happen when a pregnancy is planned and wanted. And Carrie got married early 20s, got pregnant, very much a wanted baby. And it was after she announced she was pregnant, her significant other started drinking heavily. He became physically abusive. And you hear of this happening sometimes. And she knew to have this baby would mean that she would have to be in contact with this man for the next 18 years at least. And she was afraid of him. And so she decided to terminate the pregnancy. And she lives in a very, very, very rural area and had to have somebody drive her. I think it was like 3 hours to go get the abortion. And they made her listen to the heartbeat, view the fetus, that's required in some places, and also like watch a video that was would say things like, your health might really be jeopardized. You may not be able to have children in the future. And so she went through this procedure and fell into a pretty dark place afterwards. And she went for follow-up appointments in her area. She wasn't going to drive 3 hours for the follow-up. And when she told the nurse why she was there, the nurse reprimanded her and scolded her. And so I think that contributed to the difficulty she had following this abortion. Okay, so why do people have abortions? Well, 27%, they're just not ready. The timing is bad. Another 25% can't afford a baby. 20% are at the other end of childbearing, that they're done. They're not wanting to add to their family. 9% could be relationship issues. 8% state a lack of maturity. Career or school concerns are what 4% state. And so, a lot of places, you'll hear people say that they feel abortion is okay if it's going to hurt the health of the mother, and that is the case 3% of the time, or hurt the child has severe health concerns, and that's 4% of the time. All right. So this is at a study, a qualitative study that looked at women's own words, women who had had abortions. And this one says, I don't want to be one of those statistics. There's another and on her own and has got all this baggage. Not that babies are a horrible thing, because they're not. They're the most wonderful gift in the world, but it's about when you get them. Oh my God, I'm the worst person in the world. I'm going to be so ridiculously punished in some other life for this. I terminated before it's all come to fruition, rather than have everything fall down around you, my relationship and everything, be on my own and not be able to cope, and then get postnatal depression or something further along the line, or resent the child or anything like that. I don't like regret it at all, because obviously if I'd had been with someone and lived with them, the participant had previously described difficulties in her relationship with her partner, which made maternity impossible. I think it affects me when I obviously do want to have children in the future. I'll be absolutely devastated with the choice I made. And women also feel that abortion, so what they found in some studies is that women feel that abortion is the compassionate choice to make, because their life circumstances, it would be wrong to have a child. And when we bring up the argument of give it up for adoption, sometimes women feel like, how do they know how that child will be treated by whoever adopts it? They didn't feel like they could really guarantee the kind of life that child would have. So,
Laura,
yes.
I have a comment on what you just said about the compassion, it being the compassionate thing to do for the child. I feel that many young teenage girls who become unwed mothers do opt for abortion for just that reason, because they are aware that they're not capable of taking care of the child, and the thought of carrying the child full term is not an option for them either. And so they choose the abortion simply because they feel that's what's best for the child.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that. Absolutely. What I hear too. So some sources of stigma, and we're going to see in a minute how important stigma is, because it is the single thing that correlates most with poor mental health outcomes following the abortion, the sense of stigma. And so the biggies, people worry, what if my family or friends find out? Will God forgive me? Will I be able to have kids in the future? What will I tell future healthcare providers? What about my future relationships? I have a family member who their family is this is like a distant relative, and their family is extremely religiously conservative, and the daughter had an abortion, and she was living with her parents. She was just out of high school, and her parents were very, very, very pro-life, very, very conservative, and she left, if you can imagine, the paperwork from the abortion out on the dining room table accidentally. And I don't know. I feel like to make an accident of that magnitude, you almost wonder if she was kind of subconsciously turning herself in. And it was terrible. She was kicked out of the house. They wouldn't speak to her for a long time. So I don't know.
Laura.
Yes.
That is the one thing that I thought was a little interesting about the chart you revealed about the reason, because one of the main factors that I believe contribute to abortion would be the aspect of their faith and the culture dynamics for which they grow up in. Because faith and culture serves a major component to the therapeutic relationship. And also, and I have done some research on this topic previously, and that was one of the reasons for the lack of report from many people due to the culture-based orientation, as well as the faith coming from our Catholic faith, for instance, where the pro-life choice is actually something that is indoctrinated from the age of as early as you can remember, and then growing up in an environment such as African culture, where in the Nigerian culture, Catholic is very big and its family is important, and for someone to go ahead and have an abortion, it's actually deemed as a fact of disowning your family as well as turning your back on God.
Wow. Follow up with me. I would love to put our heads together on that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, culture and religion, biggies, and we'll probably look at that a little more in some research in a few slides here coming up. So Lacey's story was she's from a family that didn't have a lot of money. She was putting herself through college by, like every kind of odd job and doing everything to pay. And she was out on her own, no support, and became pregnant. And she actually, it's interesting you mentioned that, she was from a very devout Catholic family. And she felt like, she was barely making it, like working at, fast food places and stuff. And she felt like to have a child, she couldn't. And she hadn't been with the father that long. She had some concerns about his drinking. And so she went for the abortion and had what's called a twilight anesthesia kind of, which is, it's anesthesia that it should be enough that you don't hear, see, feel anything. And this story could be a little triggering. I want to warn you. So it's not as heavy as the anesthesia you'd have like for surgery in the hospital. But you shouldn't be you should be out. And she kind of came to during it and heard things and saw things that she really shouldn't have, and went on to have really pretty severe PTSD, depression, anxiety. And it was suggested that her anxiety about the surgery, about doing this, and her guilt was so high that maybe it impacted the effectiveness of the anesthesia. Whether that's possible or not, that's beyond my pay scale. I don't know. But because she felt so bad about it, she thought the only way God would forgive her would be to hurry up, marry the guy, and get pregnant real fast. And you can kind of imagine how that went. That marriage didn't last long at all. So stress, anxiety, and stigma. So this was a study of over 300 women from 3 different clinics. And depressive, anxiety, and stress symptoms were the highest just before an abortion, okay, compared to any time afterwards. So the factors they looked at were things like sociodemographics, abortion characteristics, things like, was it later term, childhood adversity. I think it'd be fascinating to look at the childhood adversity scale, and kind of compare that to who has abortions and how they feel about the abortions or how they do after the abortion. Recent adversities with the intimate partner, so if that partner had shown some tendencies towards abuse or violence, the context of the relationship, desire for future pregnancies, and perceived abortion stigma. So of all those things, abortion stigma accounted for approximately 10% of the variance in stress, depression, and anxiety. So the takeaway from this is that looking at stigma before the abortion could significantly lower symptoms later. The Gomez study had 1,294 adolescents. It looked at pregnancy resolution outcome and subsequent depression symptoms. And it adjusted for prior depressive symptoms, trauma history, and sociodemographic covariance. They found no association of depression symptoms after an unwanted first pregnancy and subsequent depressive symptoms. Prior depressive symptoms were most closely associated with the symptoms following an abortion. So you were most likely to be depressed after an abortion if you were already depressed going in. Okay, so the research on abortion varies a lot. Most studies show that there are no mental health consequences, okay? Now, here's the thing. We have a hard time getting good information and data because this is, I think, is probably the most politically complicated issue that there is in the United States. I don't think there's anything more politically complicated. And we have a hard time having good dialogue about it because I believe that for people in the pro-choice camp, I think they may feel that to acknowledge that some women do suffer would be to almost I think maybe they would see it as throwing a bone to the pro-life camp, right? Because it's so bifurcated. And I think we need to put the politics aside and really talk about what's happening. So although the research varies, we do know that depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and psychiatric hospitalizations can very well be a reality for some women. So thinking again about what I saw at a substance abuse center, a residential substance abuse rehab program, how so, I mean, like it was like 97% of the women there had prior abuse and trauma. And I don't know the number that had abortions, but it was high. And so is that almost like this like trifecta of things going on? Previous abuse, history of abortions, and substance use. So we need more resources, and we need to identify and manage the risk for negative mental health outcomes, okay? We need to be able to say some people are going to suffer, and what can we do ahead of time to help? And so this woman wrote her whole dissertation on the idea of a pregnancy, abortion resource center, which I think is fabulous, where there would be social support, peer counseling, okay, talking to people who have been there, people who understand, screening for other mental illness or substance abuse issues, and if there are problems afterwards, providing crisis and grief counseling, okay? Okay, so that's all I have, and I keep thinking about what exactly I want to write about, and I think what it boils down to, the first thing to look at would be screening. Why do any of you in your work screen for abortions? Do you ask women if they've had abortions? And by not doing that, are we missing out on an opportunity to kind of are we missing out on an opportunity to talk about something that a woman's been through? I think that I know somebody else I knew had an abortion, and she struggled afterwards. And she went to see the counselor, and by some weird fluke, the counselor shared an office space with the local pro-life organization. So, so she couldn't even bring it up to the counselor because she thought this counselor, by virtue of sharing an office space with pro-life folks, was herself pro-life. Okay, do you get what I'm saying? So I think it stands to reason that clients could be afraid to bring it up because they think we might have strong feelings about it, might shame them, might punish them. We know it happens for medical providers, that I know enough women who have had medical providers shame them, scold them, dismiss them because of it. So it makes sense that they might have some concerns sharing that with a counselor. Okay, the other thing that I see too, women to talk about abortions because they're kind of reaching the end of not the end of their life, but maybe the end of their years of fertility and never had kids, and maybe now have regrets about what they did about having an abortion. So you guys have provided just fabulous input. In closure, what are some of your thoughts, reactions, ideas for future research?
So I have a question for you, actually. The slide that you showed, it was like the bar graph that had and it split up the different races and like the percentages of people that had abortions, live births, and things like that. Do you know why it looked like African-American women had more going on? Like, do you know what the discrepancy is, or is it just reporting, or, yeah?
Let's take a look at that. That is not something that I have investigated as much as I should. So I would love to, in looking at this slide, oops. I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts.
Let's see. Let me make sure, because I was looking at it and it's like, I thought, let me just like make sure, double check for myself to make sure, that, let's see, abortion. Yeah, it looks like, I mean, literally, like Black women are having like 2 or 3 times more abortions. I mean, even as it's kind of like, it's like 2 or 3 more times abortions, even as the years go on. It's like, it's kind of the same amount, even though the numbers are decreasing, like 2 times more than Hispanic women, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times more than like, I guess, white women. So I don't know. Like, I guess, I have colleagues who, I have professional, before I came to counseling, I had like professional colleagues, or I guess they were my friends. And like, a lot of them had abortions, but I feel like they'd had abortions because of like their stage in life. Like a lot of them were in school, and I don't know if their parents would have particularly gotten upset, but I know a lot of them had to do with school and like wanting to make sure that they finished whatever professional degree that they were pursuing at the time. So I don't know, like I don't know if it changes like per socioeconomic, I guess class. I don't know. I think I know that one reason, but I don't really know like why Black women would do it more than other people. Like I just don't, I feel like even though I'm Black, like I can't inherently think like, why would you be doing that? I guess maybe because I don't know if it's like maybe it could be socioeconomics or just, or support. Because I'm sorry, I'm just like kind of talking out loud and just kind of rambling as I think ideas come to me. But I guess maybe socioeconomics, probably support, and things like that, and feeling like there's nobody to support them through a pregnancy and things like that. So I don't know, but
Can I speak to that, please? Oh, I'm sorry for interrupting.
Oh no, I was just rambling.
As we was doing your question, I went ahead and I found some research and I was looking at it. And one of the reasons why they said the number is high with the African American is because the other race or ethnicity are underreporting because of financial means and social class. They have the ability to seek those treatment and not be a statistic or not be reported. For instance, one of the cases that was reported, it did not take her name. Her name was Client X. However, she reported having over 3 abortions per her family approval, where her socioeconomic class she afforded. However, coming from a lower socioeconomic class, you go through state funding resources. Right. So for you to be able to go through the state funding resources, there are certain demographic information that you have to disclose. Name, even if it's not name, it's gender, the social class, your race, or ethnicity. So as a result, those information are reported. However, for those ethnicity or racial or culture that does not have to utilize the state funding resources, their information are not reported to the data because it is a private sector, so it's not reporting it. That's why one of the number is high. And another thing was, as you indicated, the lack of support. However, it is the lack of support per discharge is actually across the board. But the culture aspect and the social class is what determine the numbers. And at this time, they said these numbers can be as skewed as the suicidal rate being reported by males or the sexual trauma rate being reported by males, because they are not documenting it. Just because they are not reporting it does not mean that it is not occurring. So that was the 2 main factors that I thought contributed to that. Because I personally work with, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. That is interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, I personally work with, my mom is an OBGYN and working with my mom being an OBGYN and working alongside her, the main factor was seeing people coming to her and asking, can we not put this on the books? Those were things that people actually asked, and especially coming from a Catholic culture, it was a 1 in every 3 girl before she hit her sophomore year will commit an abortion. Will her family know? No, her family is not going to know. Is it going to be published? No, because they have those private sector that is actually not utilizing the public funds, but it does occur. And sometimes the joke was she's going to take an anesthesia vacation, and everyone knew what it was. So that was
Wow.
very interesting.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, I'd love to. That's something I need to look in more, how what it has to do with ethnicity, religion,
Right.
those kind of things.
That was a great question. Thanks for asking that.
Oh no, I was curious. Thank you so much for definitely like getting a paper for me in the middle of my rambling. So
I too, this is the biggest thing that drive counseling is the lack of reporting, but the inclusiveness, the lack of inclusiveness, because culture, social class, gender, ethnicity, and religion skew many reports. And if those aspects are not utilized, those reports are not accurate. Because I had this, as a Catholic right now, we are in Lent, a personal disclosure, and it is pro-life. Every day is pro-life and pro-life. And I had a parish mate ask me, how can it always be pro-life when God is a God of mercy? But then there's another aspect of the abortion side that we are not seeing. When how can you present this data and finding to a client and have them take this as fact when they can actually research and find other options and say, no, my culture is not having the most abortion because you are not reporting. It does not make it accurate. So then you have to tailor treatment precisely to the person, because the individualism is what is going to nurture the healthy therapeutic alliance and the success for a safety therapeutic environment. So that is the one thing that I will look at before I even ask anyone about abortion. What facts do I have? What data do I have? How is this going to affect the treatment? And is this individualized, or is it skewed from my personal bias? That is the one thing to actually ponder before going forward, because it's a very personal question. It's as if you ask me someone, are you sexually active?
Yeah.
Are you my mother will be the next question.
Right. Right. But I feel like sometimes, I feel like, unfortunately, like sometimes you have to ask those difficult questions to kind of begin to, I guess, as counselors and medical professionals and things like that, you have to open those doors and ask those difficult questions. Like, even if people get defensive, because like I said, prior to coming here, we had a discussion about women reporting domestic violence. It's like, why don't we ask that? You know what I mean? It's just, it's kind of, it's the whole nature, the whole, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it's a whole, I guess, nature of silence and like not reporting things and not saying things that really keep people bound up and really, kind of keep them from really getting, I guess, in my mind, the healing or whatever they need to get.
Amen. Wow, you guys have been fantastic. I never know how this subject is going to go, and you guys have just been wonderful. I would love to hear from you. My email address is up there. I'd love to keep the conversation going, and let's do something with this. So there's a lot of passion and insight and intelligence in this room. So thank you. Have a wonderful weekend, and I sure hope to hear from you.
Thank you again, Laura. Thanks so much for the great question. I really appreciate it.
Oh, good to talk to you too. Look,
thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for your reply, Maya. Look, I'm Catholic too, so it's like when you started talking about it, I was like, yes, girl, we're in the middle of Lent. Look, I'm on the end of giving up Instagram. I get it. Like like I married, I kind of became